Hi, I'm John Leavitt. This is my brother Stephen Leavitt. We're with Leavitt Funeral Home, and we're fifth-generation funeral directors, and we're going to be discussing some information about probably one of the topics people ask us most about, and that's cremation. There's a lot of things to ask about cremation, but we're going to try and highlight maybe four areas. One being just the cremation process in itself. The second one being a lot of questions that we get on specifics about cremation. Talk about the service options and caskets and urns that go along with those services. And last, probably one of the questions we get most asked is, well, how much does a cremation cost? So we're going to discuss those throughout this video.
As a funeral home, we've been offering cremation services for a long time. But in 1994, our dad actually had the foresight to purchase and install the area's first crematory.
The crematory is really nothing more than a cremation chamber that has two chambers. One is you place the body into the cremation chamber, which heats up to about 14 to 1600 degrees, which is where the body is. There's a secondary chamber, and this might be helpful for those that are concerned about the environment and things like that. But really the purpose of the second chambers for the gases, so nothing is going out into the atmosphere that shouldn't be going out there. That actually gets up to about 1800 to 2000 degrees. And I think everybody probably assumes, but we always like to reassure people, we only do one cremation at a time. That's how they're designed. Actually, the law stipulates you can only do one, though that's how we do it anyways.
One of the biggest questions probably people ask us is, does the body have to be embalmed? But if you're going to have services with the body present, then most funeral homes, and our funeral home, we do require the body to be embalmed.
Some people also ask, do I have to have an urn, or am I allowed to scatter the cremated remains? Depending on what you're doing, we'll talk about urns and some selections a little bit later, but the question about the law and scattering cremated remains, what has to happen before cremation takes place really is a couple things. Is one, as far as the laws go, one is that we have to have a local authority. In West Virginia, that's the county coroner, and in Ohio, it's the registrar or the city or county has to give you an authorization to cremate. Because once cremation's done, it's irreversible. Right. So they can't do autopsies, they can't test blood, they can't, they really want to make sure everything's ready to go before you cremate the person. So you have to get that from an official, but then also we have to get an authorization signed from a family member.
We've been fortunate to be able to be serving families in this area since 1882. And so with that in mind, we've kind of created what we call the Leavitt Cremation Promise. It's a promise to every family that we serve that with 100% certainty that they will receive the remains of their loved one back. Every person that we receive into our care is identified with the identification tag, and that stays with them through the entire process. There's also during the cremation process, there's a little metal disc that stays with those remains from the time that the cremation process begins to the time that you receive your loved one's remains back. Some of the extra steps that we like to take are that every single cremation that we perform, the person is positively identified by their family member or a representative of the family. We also, every cremation that we do, we have a ledger that we keep in a fireproof safe to ensure, and that has the identification tag number and everything so that again, with 100% certainty, we can make sure everybody receives the remains of their loved one.
When we hear a family come to us, they say, well, Mom said she wanted to be cremated. And they're not really sure what that means, and we start having a discussion for that. So what we found out in watching and experiencing and working with many families is the importance of having some type of a service or a time together to come with family and friends, to allow the public to come share with families. whether somebody's being buried or whether they're being cremated, they still go through the same grief and loss when somebody dies. There's two things that someone that chooses cremation needs to select, and one is what the person's going to be in through through the visitation, if you're having visitation, or taking to our crematory if you're not having visitation or a gathering. And they make, if you're having a visitation, they actually do make, some people ask, do you have to have a casket? And the answer is no, depending on the services. They do make caskets if you're having a visitation or a service that you can either rent. They do have those. We find more families are actually selecting, they're starting to make cremation caskets that are designed specifically for cremation because the costs of them aren't very much, so it makes it a better choice than renting a casket oftentimes.
How much does cremation cost?
And with like a lot of things, that's very difficult to answer just with a simple price, but as you can see that Steve and I have talked about service options, a lot of that depends on the type of services that we choose or the families choose and what they need. I think on our website, as far as services, we got, based on some of those packages that we have on our website and the services we've talked about, you can get a little bit of idea on that.
When you compare it to traditional ground burial, cremation is less expensive because you don't have some of the things such as vaults and markers necessarily that you have to that you're purchasing. You can always give us a call at the funeral home if there are more specific questions that you have about cremation.
Yeah, so we hope you take that time and look through some of the information we have, and certainly call us, Stephen or I, and we have some people that help people pre-plan and work through this. So give us a call, and thank you for joining us.